Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Palestinian armed groups vow more attacks on Israeli settlers. Karzai accuses NATO of killing civilians, and Iranian Baij forces attack opposition leader's home. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Thirteen Palestinian resistance groups announced the formation of a joint operations room to strengthen the resistance against the Israeli occupation. A spokesman for Al-Aqsa Brigades said that the response will be thunderous to what he called the land-selling negotiations between the Palestinian and Israeli authorities.
For its part, Israel tightened its intelligence and military measures in Israel and the southern parts of the occupied West Bank.
خلية العمليات المشتركة ضد الاحتلال الإسرائيلي جاء الإعلان عن تشكيلها بعد.
The formation of a joint operations room against the Israeli occupation was announced hours after the Israeli Prime Minister and Palestinian President agreed to hold direct talks. 13 Palestinian groups vowed to increase attacks on Israel in response to what they called land-selling negotiations.
The authority in Ramallah will slide into a whirlpool of absurd and useless negotiations again. We completely reject this action. These negotiations create a cover for the Zionist enemy's aggression on our people. We will not allow these negotiations to mislead our people. The resistance's thunderous words will be the response to the land-selling negotiations.
ومن بين هذه الفصائل 13 منظمة الجهاد الإسلامي.
These 13 groups include the Islamic Jihad, the Popular Resistance Committees, and a splinter-armed group from Fatah. Al-Qassam Brigades, the military wing for Hamas, claimed responsibility for an operation that killed 4 Israeli settlers in the West Bank shortly before the negotiations.
المفاوضات أسفرت عن مقتل 4 مستوطنين إسرائيليين.
The brigades also claimed responsibility within 24 hours after an attack took place near a Jewish settlement in the West Bank, wounding 2 Israelis. For their part, the Israeli authorities tightened their intelligence and military measures in the West Bank, specifically in Hebron and the Green Line areas, preparing for any potential security developments after the resistance groups announced their threats.
وتحديدا منطقة الخليل ومنطقة الخط الأخضر لمواجهة أي تطورات.
However, despite the threats that the resistance may create by launching more attacks during the negotiations, the two sides, Palestinian and Israeli, both showed their will to enter the negotiations in spite of other possible consequences.
مسار المفاوضات فإن الجانبين الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني أبديا حرصهما على الخوض فيها.
Besides the acute disputes and lack of trust between the two sides, which create widespread doubts on the chance of success of these negotiations, the two sides are expected to confront their first obstacle on September 26th.
فمن المتوقع أن تواجه هذه المفاوضات أولى عقباتها بحلول 26.
This is the date on which the partial freeze that Israel imposed on constructing new residential buildings in the West Bank will end.
بناء مساكن جديدة في المستوطنات بالضفة الغربية. فقد ينسحب الفلسطينيون من المفاوضات إذا لم.
The Palestinian president affirmed shortly before the peace talks that the Palestinians may pull out of the negotiations if the freeze is not renewed.
On the World Quds Day, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said that negotiations between the Palestinian and Israeli authorities were born dead and have failed.
In his speech for the occasion, Ahmadinejad added that the only path for Palestinians is not peace talks and negotiations, but resistance.
لقد ولدت ميتة هذه المفاوضات لم يكن لها أي أساس.
These negotiations are born dead. They don't have any basis. When the fundamental issues, the rights of the Palestinian people, and the realities in the region have not been confronted, it is clear that these negotiations will fail. I say this out loud and in all honesty, that the fate of the Palestinians is decided in Palestine, through the Palestinian people's resistance, not in Washington or Paris or London.
Meanwhile, massive marches have started in Tehran and other Iranian cities to mark the World Quds Day, the last Friday of Ramadan.
Participants in these marches carried slogans denouncing Israeli policies in occupied Jerusalem and called on Muslims to take action in order to achieve victory.
No talks if the settlement freeze ends. This is what Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas threatened to do in response to remarks issued by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said that the partial settlement freeze is due to expire at the end of September. The most notable outcome of the first day of the direct talks was a promise made by both sides to meet every 2 weeks, with the first round scheduled for October 14th in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the presence of U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Our correspondent Emil Baroudi reports from Washington.
A new formula was introduced by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the opening session of the direct talks at the headquarters of the U.S. State Department. This is the first time in the history of Palestinian-Israeli talks that the Israeli Prime Minister refers to Palestinian sovereignty over its territories, though it was conditional.
President Abbas, I'm fully aware and I respect.
President Abbas, I'm fully aware and I respect your people's desire for sovereignty. I'm convinced that it's possible to reconcile that desire with Israel's need for security.
The Palestinian side has shown an understanding of Israel's desire for security, but in return, PA President Mahmoud Abbas said that Israel must understand that freezing its settlement activities during the talks is important to their continuity.
We call on the Israeli government to move forward with its commitment to end all settlement activities and completely lift the siege imposed on the Gaza Strip, as well as halt all forms of incitements.
How can we ensure the success of talks that are facing so many obstacles? The answer may vary depending on who you ask.
Now that the U.S. has committed itself and invited the partners of peace to attend the conference, it will not allow the negotiation process to collapse within 1 month. It's impossible.
There will, of course, be a shared understanding that neither side wants to be embarrassed. Of course, there are problems and grievances by our side, but we will try to resolve all issues within the framework of negotiations.
Senator George Mitchell informed reporters of the next scheduled round of negotiations, set to take place on September 14th and 15th. Sources close to the Israeli delegation said that Mahmoud Abbas and Benjamin Netanyahu have met one-on-one for nearly 2 hours. They discussed several issues, including some final status issues. Now, after the barriers separating the two sides have been removed, the peace partners will move quietly to explore ways to help resolve some of the secondary issues to prevent any possible backlash on the core issues. Emil Baroudi, Dubai TV, Washington.
Meanwhile, back here at home, in reaction to Tuesday's fatal shooting near Hebron, the Yesha Settlers Council announced that it will unilaterally resume construction in West Bank settlements without waiting for September 26th. In a symbolic gesture, settlers gathered in a few settlements yesterday evening to dedicate those building projects. In the settlement of Adam, north of Jerusalem, bulldozers began work and dozens of residents gathered to lay the groundwork for a new community centre.
I congratulate Prime Minister Netanyahu for telling Secretary Clinton that we will continue to build in Judea and Samaria in September 26. Only last night we saw the price that we are paying, Jewish blood, for the wishful thinking of the American president. We have to stop it. We have to continue to build.
And I'm very happy to welcome Knesset member Danon here with me in the studio. You were there, and I'm going to ask you about that in a second, about last night. But first, let me ask you about your reaction to Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech in Washington tonight.
I think that our Prime Minister is playing a game, the game of wishful thinking that is forced on him by the American president. We know there is no viable partner. We knew for years that Abu Mazen has no control over Gaza. On the last few nights, we saw that he has no control over the West Bank.
But when you say the Prime Minister is playing a game, do you think he's being sincere when he says he believes he can reach a peace deal in a year?
Prime Minister now knows that there is no partner. There can be no peace agreement when you have no partner. So he said, I will be willing to move ahead if there will be a partner. And I congratulate him for telling Secretary Clinton that we will continue to build in September 26. Only last night he said it. But I'm not happy to hear the voices from the Prime Minister saying that within a year we can have an agreement. We know it is not feasible. We know it will not work. You need a leadership among the Palestinians in order to have a real, genuine peace process.
The problem, though, is that you are in a minority, even in your own Likud party, are you not? Last night, I understand there was a meeting in Ariel of supporters of the settlement movement. Only 3 Likud MKs showed up.
I do not agree with you. In the event last night in Ariel, we had more people, Likud members, attending than the event that the Prime Minister held before he left to Washington. The people who voted for the Likud voted for a different platform than Kadima and Labour.
No, I think that's true, but nevertheless, only 3 members of Knesset, they're the ones who have the vote.
I invite you to come on September 26th. I will have a major event in Revava. We will celebrate the building in Judea and Samaria, and over there you will see ministers, members of Knesset, that will come and say, we are in the Likud, we are going back to the real path of the movement, building in Judea and Samaria.
Thousands of Muslims and non-Muslims across Iran took to the streets to mark the International Quds Day. Press TV's Salman Khoujouri has been on the streets of Tehran filing this report. The last Friday of the month of Ramadan. Nationwide rallies to mark the International Quds Day. Iranians, like many others around the globe, took to the streets to denounce Israel's atrocities against Palestinians, especially the besieged people of Gaza. Holding up placards and chanting slogans, demonstrators called for the liberation of Jerusalem and Quds. The protesters also called for an end to Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories.
We are here to voice our solidarity with Palestinians and show that we will never leave them alone. Palestinian children, we love you and we always support you.
The International Quds Day was first designated by the late founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Imam Khomeini, back in August 1979.
Well, as you can see behind me, thousands of people from different walks of life are taking part in the demonstrations to mark the International Quds Day, among them religious minorities.
Experts believe the issue of Palestine has gone beyond the boundaries of Islamic countries and is not just a problem of the Islamic world.
Zionism has nothing to do with the teachings of Judaism. Zionism is a political ideology and quite different from Judaism. Therefore, we as Jewish people condemn Zionists.
This is a crucial issue and a central issue on which everyone can be united, mainly the Muslims, but also all others, because the right to worship, the right to respect the place of worship is the fundamental right of not only the Muslims of a particular religion of who believe in this, but also the right of and the duty of everyone in the world.
Addressing a large gathering, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad described resistance as the only way to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands. Meanwhile, referring to the direct talks between Israel and the Palestinian Authority in Washington, President Ahmadinejad said that such talks are doomed to failure because they have no basis.
Decades of talks have brought about nothing for Palestinians. Arab nations must learn from the past. Israel is on the brink of collapse and nothing, including U.S. boys, can save it. Tel Aviv will be brought to justice in international courts.
Though the International Quds Day has a special focus on Palestine, it has become a symbolic day for resistance against any sort of oppression and domineering policies anywhere around the globe. Sama Kujuri, Press TV, Tehran.
The Israeli occupation is exploiting ignorance of the essential facts of the Aqsa Mosque to carry out a scheme that would divide the mosque and dig tunnels underneath it. Israel separates the structures of the mosque from the Temple Mount, portraying the buildings as the sacred Islamic sites, while the area is not sacred. This report will shed some light on the issue.
لا شك أن المسجد الأقصى المبارك يواجه اليوم مخاطر عديدة تهدد هويته وبنيانه.
There is no doubt that the Holy Aqsa Mosque is facing numerous dangers today that threaten its identity and its historic building. The excavations at the Aqsa Mosque and its precincts constitute one of the most prominent dangers, as they not only threaten the architectural structure of the mosque, but also redraw the identity of its precincts, granting it an odd Jewish identity that does not belong to the Aqsa Mosque. Today, these excavations are no longer mere separate tunnels dug to disrupt the foundation of the Aqsa Mosque, but they have become shrines and tourist sites that constitute together a historical Jewish city with multiple entrances.
متعددة المداخل تشبه في شكلها ومحتواها الشكل الذي يتخيله الصهاينة لمدينة القدس.
The city of Jerusalem has adopted the shape and essence that the Zionists believed the city had during the time of the alleged First and Second Temples. Its main purpose is to manufacture Jewish history in the city of Jerusalem that would prove the alleged right of the Zionists to the city and distort the overwhelming Islamic and Arab presence in the city along with their sacred sites. Today, the occupation is building a Jerusalem that is made of settlements that live inside walls, severed from everything that is Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, and Christian. It is now building a pure capital for Israel that has no place for non-Jews. Israel is waging a war that it believes to bear no cost in order to ameliorate its fate in the city that fell under its control 43 years ago. It is waging a war against time, pushed by the realization that what cannot be accomplished today will not be possible to achieve tomorrow or the day after. The inevitable imbalance of power is not in its favor. It is worth mentioning that Muslim scholars have proved that the Aqsa Mosque is comprised of everything that surrounds it and spans 144,000 square meters. Promoting the truth is an essential priority in terminating the plan to divide the mosque, in addition to fostering Arab and Muslim awareness of the nature of the danger that the mosque is facing.
بطبيعة الخطر الذي يتهدده.
شنت قوى الأمن الإيرانية وقوى البسيج حملة اعتقالات.
Iranian security and Basij forces have launched random sweeps against reformists in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Security units were heavily deployed in Iranian major cities in anticipation of opposition protests to mark Al-Quds Day. Incoming reports also confirmed that members of the Basij forces and plainclothes security officers were deployed in major public squares. In addition, a state of emergency was declared by the various security institutions in the country. Knowledgeable Iranian sources told our Al-Arabiya channel that a special force affiliated with the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, attacked opposition reformist leader Mehdi Karoubi. The sources added that the security forces attacked Karoubi's home with firebombs and prevented him from leaving his home to take part in the celebrations marking Al-Quds Day. Karoubi's guards clashed with members of the Wilayat Faqih, or Iranian guardianship of the jurist, security forces.
The notable deployment of the Iranian security forces on the major streets of the Iranian capital, Tehran, aims to counter public protests marking the anniversary of Al-Quds Day. Reformist groups called for holding protests against what they referred to as the crackdown on public freedoms, forging the elections, and religious persecution. Security forces were deployed in the Boulevard and Wali Asr streets, as well as in and around the Inqilab Square and the university neighborhoods. According to incoming reports, members of the Basij forces and plainclothes security officers were heavily deployed in major public squares. In addition, a state of emergency was declared by all security institutions, especially the Tha'ir Allah, or Vengeance of God forces. Tha'ir Allah Brigade is an offshoot of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards that is responsible for the protection of Tehran. The sources added that some members of the Basij forces were dispatched from cities adjacent to the Iranian capital. The security forces were deployed to terrorize the citizens and counter any protests planned by the opposition to mark Al-Quds Day. Before the bombing of his home, reformist leader Mehdi Karoubi met with Mir Hossein Moussawi to condemn what they referred to as the government of liars. The two leaders stressed the importance of marking Al-Quds Day and also promised that a new dawn will soon come. Sources close to Moussawi and Karoubi said that the two leaders avoided to call for public protests, but left the door open for reformist organizations and groups to make the call. Incoming reports also confirm that the Iranian authorities have imposed a strict ban on the use of the internet and denied access to reformist and opposition websites. The Iranian authorities also blocked the use of electronic mail, such as Gmail, Hotmail, and Yahoo, in an attempt to prevent coverage of the protests and demonstrations marking Al-Quds Day. Al-Arabiya.
اتهم الرئيس الأفغاني حامد كارزاي القوات الدولية في بلاده بقتل 10
Afghan President Hamid Karzai accused NATO troops in Afghanistan of killing 10 activists working on the campaign of a parliamentary election candidate. The elections are scheduled to take place this month. He said that the campaign workers were killed in an airstrike launched by NATO forces in Takhar, northern Afghanistan. NATO released a statement saying that the airstrike targeted a member of the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. This coincided with US Secretary of Defense Robert Gates' arrival in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's government and people seem to be fed up with the NATO forces' operations in their country because airstrikes often end up killing scores of civilians. The latest airstrike was launched on the relatively peaceful Rostok district in northern Afghanistan near Tajikistan. NATO released a statement saying that its forces have carried out a surgical strike targeting an important member of the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. But Afghan President Hamid Karzai gave a different account as he welcomed U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates.
According to the reports that we have so far, 10 were killed and 3 wounded in this operation. The nature of the operation and the presence of the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan's personalities or activists have to be determined. We are investigating it, and as it turns out, we will then share the information with our allies, the United States and NATO.
Gates promised to investigate the airstrike, which, like previous airstrikes, caused tension between Afghanistan and the U.S. The tension is not only created by these operations, it is also fueled by the spread of corruption, which the U.S. fears favors the Taliban.
President Karzai and I also discussed our respective efforts against the incidents of corruption that, as he forthrightly noted, saps the strength and resources of the Afghan people and diminishes their support for their elected government. I want to note that the U.S. must make sure that American dollars and other foreign assistance do not fuel corruption.
Gates arrived in Afghanistan from Iraq after attending the withdrawal ceremony of U.S. combat troops there. His visit carries a message to the Taliban and the Afghan government that Washington will intensify its military fights against the Taliban. The U.S. admits that the Taliban has gained more influence in the region 9 years after its leadership was ousted. Ola Maki, BBC News.
As part of their ongoing security efforts, Iraqi security agencies in the city of Mosul dismantled a terrorist cell specializing in assassinations. Several members of the group were arrested. In addition, security forces stormed a special shop used to manufacture firearm silencers.
During the interrogation, the terrorists confessed to carrying out assassinations targeting members of the security agencies and the public.
Acting on specific intelligence tips, the command center of the Iraqi Federal Police, 3rd Infantry Division, was able to dismantle a terrorist cell suspected of carrying out assassination operations in the city of Mosul. 5 terror suspects were arrested in the raid.
We received intelligence information confirming that a terrorist cell was operating a shop used to manufacture firearm silencers in the industrial district of Wadi Aqab. We formed a task force under the direction of Major General Mohammed Sabri Latif, the commander of the Iraqi Federal Police, 3rd Infantry Division. The operation was carried out in coordination coordination with the Information Division of the Sawat al-Fursan Brigade, or Charge of the Knights. Our forces raided the shop and arrested 5 terror suspects on charges of operating and manufacturing firearm silencers.
After gathering intelligence, the Information Division of the Sawat al-Fursan Brigade raided the terrorist hideout in the industrial district of Wadi Ikab. The shop was used to manufacture firearm silencers and bombs.
We formed a task force made up of heroes from the Information Division of the Sawat al-Fursan Brigade, under the direction of the Commander-in-Chief of the Iraqi Army's 3rd Infantry Division. The officers arrested 5 terrorists and seized a shop that was used to manufacture firearm silencers.
During the interrogation, the men confessed to operating the terrorist cell and carrying out assassinations, targeting members of the security agencies and the public in the city of Mosul. The command center of the National Police in Mosul has dismantled a terrorist cell specializing in assassinations and arrested most of its members. During the interrogation, the suspects admitted to operating the terrorist cell, as well as carrying out assassinations in the province of Nineveh. Samir Saluka, Iraqiya, Mosul.
The command center of the Iraqi Rapid Intervention Forces has arrested the defense minister of the so-called Islamic State of Iraq during a security operation in the county of Abu Ghraib. The commander of the Rapid Intervention Forces, Major General Numan Dahil, said that his officers carried out a sting operation in the county of Abu Ghraib in pursuit of terror suspects. Among the suspects arrested in the operation was the so-called Hudayr Ali Diab.
Several members of the Al-Qaeda terrorist group were killed while trying to plant bombs or detonate booby-trapped cars in Anbar province. The spokesman of the Anbar Provincial Police Department said that the arrests of Al-Qaeda explosive engineers and experts have led to faulty detonation of booby-trapped cars. The source added that the rise in the number of terrorists killed while trying to detonate bombs is due to the lack of knowledge in detonation techniques and due to the mishandling of dangerous dual-use materials.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.